Hey Virgo, I just pulled some cards for you, and honestly, I need to share what came through because this reading feels really significant. I shuffled the deck thinking about how your past experiences shape the emotional patterns you carry today, and the energy that came through was so clear. Let me walk you through what the cards revealed. So I pulled the Four of Cups first, and this card immediately made me pause. You know that feeling when you're sitting there surrounded by opportunities or even love offerings, but something inside you just feels numb to it all? That's what this card is showing me about your emotional landscape right now. There's this quality of emotional withdrawal that stems from something deeper in your past. I'm seeing that you might have experienced disappointment before. Maybe someone offered you their heart and it didn't turn out the way you hoped. Or perhaps you invested emotionally in situations that left you feeling empty. What happens with this energy, Virgo, is that your soul starts to protect itself by becoming somewhat desensitized to new possibilities. It's not that you don't want connection or joy, it's that part of you has learned to expect less, so you won't be hurt again. This card is revealing how your past disappointments have created this subtle barrier where even when good things show up, there's this voice inside saying, but what if it's just like before? I find this really interesting because the Four of Cups isn't about having nothing. It's about having things available but not being able to fully receive them because of internal walls. Your past has taught you to be cautious, maybe overly analytical about people's intentions. And this reading is showing that this protection mechanism is something you carry forward into new situations. The universe wants you to know that recognizing this pattern is the first step toward healing it. The second card that came through is Strength and Wow, Virgo. This speaks to something really powerful about your journey. This isn't the kind of strength where you're fighting against the world or proving yourself through force. This is the quiet, internal strength that comes from having survived emotional challenges and learning to tame your own inner chaos. What I'm seeing here is that your past experiences, especially the difficult ones, have built this incredible resilience in you. You've had to develop patience with yourself, compassion for your own healing process, and the ability to face your fears without running away. This card often appears when someone has been through something that could have broken them, but instead it made them wiser and gentler. I think about how Virgo energy naturally wants to analyze and fix everything, but strength is teaching you that some things can't be solved through logic alone. Your past has shown you that emotional healing requires a different kind of courage, the courage to feel things fully, to sit with discomfort, to be vulnerable even when it scares you. The beautiful thing about this card in your reading is that it's confirming you already have this strength within you. You've already proven you can handle emotional complexity. The question now becomes, how do you use this strength moving forward? Are you using it to keep yourself safe behind walls, or are you ready to use it to open yourself up again? This card suggests that your past struggles weren't meant to harden you permanently, but to teach you how to be both strong and soft at the same time. Next, I drew the Six of Cups, and this card really illuminates something specific about your emotional patterns. This is the card of nostalgia, childhood memories, and past connections that still hold emotional weight in your present life. What's coming through clearly is that many of your current emotional responses are rooted in earlier experiences, possibly from childhood or formative relationships. Maybe there was someone in your past who showed you a particular type of love or connection, and now you unconsciously measure new people against that memory. Or perhaps there's an innocence you once had about relationships that got wounded somewhere along the way, and part of you is still grieving that loss. The Six of Cups often indicates that you might idealize certain aspects of the past, not because those times were perfect, but because they represent a version of yourself that felt more open or hopeful. I'm getting the sense that you sometimes retreat into memories when present reality feels too complicated or disappointing. This isn't necessarily bad, Virgo, but the cards are suggesting you need to examine whether these past connections and experiences are serving your growth or keeping you stuck. Are you holding on to how things used to be because it feels safer than facing how things are now? There's also something here about forgiveness and making peace with your younger self. The Six of Cups can indicate that your inner child holds keys to understanding your present emotional patterns. Maybe you learned early on that love comes with conditions, or that expressing needs leads to disappointment. These early imprints are still influencing how you show up in relationships today. The invitation here is to bring awareness to these patterns with compassion rather than judgment. The Hanged Man came through next, and this is such a significant card for understanding your emotional evolution. This card represents a complete shift in perspective, a willingness to see things from an entirely different angle. What the Hanged Man is revealing about your past is that you've been through periods where everything you thought you knew about love, connection, or relationships got turned upside down. Maybe you believed certain things about how relationships should work, and life showed you something completely different. Perhaps you had to let go of control and surrender to circumstances you couldn't change. This card often appears when someone has experienced a kind of spiritual or emotional suspension, where normal life pauses and you're forced to just be with yourself and your thoughts. I'm sensing that your past has required you to sacrifice certain illusions or expectations. The Hanged Man isn't a comfortable energy because it asks you to release the need to force outcomes or maintain the illusion of control. For Virgo energy, which naturally wants to organize and perfect everything, this can feel especially challenging. But here's what's beautiful about this card in your reading. It shows that you've gained wisdom through surrender. You've learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is change your perspective, rather than trying to change external circumstances. Your past has taught you that resistance creates suffering and acceptance creates peace. The emotional patterns this has created in you are complex because part of you has learned to let go, but another part might still be trying to figure out how to engage fully with life again after periods of suspension or waiting. Now I pulled Wheel of Fortune, and this card is really significant because it speaks to cycles and timing in your emotional life. The wheel reminds us that nothing stays the same forever. Everything moves in cycles of ups and downs, beginnings and endings. When I look at this card in the context of your past shaping your present emotions, I see that you've experienced the full rotation of this wheel already. You've been at the top where things felt good and promising, and you've been at the bottom where everything felt heavy and stuck. This cyclical experience has given you a certain wisdom about impermanence. You know now that when things are difficult, it won't last forever, but you also know that when things are good, they can change too. This awareness can be both liberating and anxiety-inducing. On one hand, you understand that painful emotions and situations will pass. On the other hand, you might struggle to fully trust good moments because you're aware they could change. The Wheel of Fortune in your reading suggests that your past has taught you about the role of timing and fate in your emotional life. There have probably been moments where you thought you had control over how things would unfold, only to discover that larger forces were at play. Maybe you met someone at the wrong time, or a relationship ended not because anyone did anything wrong, but because the timing wasn't right. This creates an interesting emotional pattern where you're learning to balance between taking action and trusting the natural flow of life. The wheel is also about karma, and what goes around comes around. Your past experiences are part of a larger cycle of learning and growth. What you've been through wasn't random. It was preparing you for where you need to go next. The Tower appeared in your reading, and I have to say this is one of the most intense cards in the deck. When the Tower shows up, it represents sudden upheaval, structures crumbling, and moments where everything you thought was solid gets shaken to its foundation. The fact that this card is present when we're looking at how your past shapes your present emotions tells me that you've been through something genuinely difficult. Maybe it was a relationship that ended suddenly and dramatically, or a betrayal that shattered your trust, or a moment where your whole perception of someone or something got completely dismantled. The Tower doesn't represent gentle change. It represents the kind of change that feels destructive, even if it's ultimately necessary. What this creates in your emotional landscape, Virgo, is a heightened awareness of vulnerability. Once you've experienced a Tower moment, you become acutely aware that stability can be an illusion, that things can fall apart even when you think you're doing everything right. This can make you cautious, maybe even hypervigilant about protecting yourself from future upheaval. You might find yourself looking for warning signs, trying to predict problems before they happen, maintaining a certain emotional distance so that if things fall apart again, it won't hurt as much. But here's what the Tower ultimately teaches. Sometimes things need to fall apart so that something more authentic can be built. The structures that crumbled were probably limiting you in ways you couldn't see at the time. Yes, it was painful and disorienting, but it also freed you from situations or patterns that weren't serving your highest good. The emotional residue of Tower experiences can last a long time, but recognizing its role in your growth helps you integrate the lesson rather than just carry the trauma. Six of Swords came next, and this card feels like a breath of fresh air after the Tower. The Six of Swords represents transition, moving from turbulent waters to calmer ones, making a conscious choice to leave something behind and move towards something better. What I'm seeing here is that your past isn't just about what happened to you, It's also about the decisions you made to move forward despite difficulty. This card shows that you didn't stay stuck in pain, you made the choice to transition. Maybe you left a relationship that wasn't healthy, or you moved away from a situation that was draining you, or you simply decided internally that you needed to shift your mindset and approach to life. The Six of Swords acknowledges that this kind of movement isn't easy. You don't leave things behind without some grief or sadness, even when you know it's the right choice. What this creates in your present emotional state is a kind of cautious hope. You've proven to yourself that you can move through difficult transitions, but you also carry the memory of how hard it was. This might make you hesitant to fully commit to new situations, because part of you remembers the pain of having to leave the last thing behind. There's also something here about traveling light emotionally. The Six of Swords suggests you've learned not to carry everything from your past into your future. You've had to choose what's worth holding on to and what needs to be released. This selective memory and emotional editing is actually a survival skill, but it's worth examining whether you're also leaving behind parts of yourself that deserve to be integrated and healed rather than abandoned. The World card appeared, and this is such a powerful symbol of completion and integration. When the world shows up in a reading about past experiences shaping present emotions, it indicates that you've come full circle with something significant. You've completed a major cycle of learning and growth. Think about it, Virgo. You've been through the whole journey represented by the major arcana, from innocence through challenge, from loss through recovery, and now you're arriving at a place of wholeness. What the world reveals is that your past experiences, as difficult as some of them were, have actually brought you to a place of greater wisdom and completeness. You understand yourself better now. You know what you want and don't want in relationships. You've developed boundaries and self-awareness that you didn't have before. The World card is about integration, taking all the fragmented parts of your experience and weaving them into a coherent whole. This doesn't mean your journey is over, but it does mean you've reached a significant milestone. The emotional pattern this creates is interesting because there can be a sense of, now what? That comes with completion. When you've done the work, healed the wounds, learned the lessons, there's this moment of standing at a threshold wondering what comes next. The World card suggests you're ready for a new beginning, but one that's informed by everything you've learned. You're not starting from scratch, you're starting from wisdom. Your past has prepared you for whatever comes next, and the universe is acknowledging that you've earned this moment of completion and celebration. Five of Swords showed up, and this card brings some really important awareness about conflict and the way you handle disagreements or competition in relationships. The Five of Swords often represents situations where winning came at a cost, or where someone walked away feeling defeated even if they technically won the argument. When we look at how your past shapes your present emotions, this card suggests you've experienced some painful conflicts that left scars. Maybe there were arguments where harsh words were said that couldn't be taken back, or situations where you felt you had to fight for your position or defend yourself in ways that didn't feel good. The Five of Swords can also represent betrayal, or feeling like someone was more interested in being right than in finding resolution. What this creates in your emotional patterns now is possibly a reluctance to engage in conflict, or alternatively, a defensive stance where you're ready to protect yourself at the first sign of disagreement. You might find yourself either avoiding confrontation entirely or coming out swinging harder than necessary because you've learned that being vulnerable in conflict can lead to pain. This card is asking you to examine your relationship with winning and losing in emotional contexts. Do you sometimes sacrifice connection for the sake of being right? Or do you give in too easily to avoid conflict, even when your needs aren't being met? The past conflicts represented by the Five of Swords have taught you something about self-protection. But the question is whether those protective strategies are still serving you or whether they're creating more distance in your relationships than necessary. The final card I pulled is King of Pentacles, and this really brings the reading together beautifully. The King of Pentacles represents mastery, stability, and the kind of practical wisdom that comes from lived experience. When this card appears in the context of your emotional patterns, it suggests that all of these past experiences have been building toward a more grounded, mature version of yourself. You're not the same person who went through those early disappointments or upheavals. You've developed emotional stability and self-reliance that comes from having weathered storms and come through intact. The King of Pentacles knows his worth and doesn't need external validation to feel secure. He's built something solid within himself that can't be easily shaken. For you, Virgo, this card is revealing that your past has taught you the value of being self-sufficient emotionally. You've learned that you can't rely on others to complete you or make you feel whole. You have to build that foundation within yourself. This is incredibly mature and healthy, but it's worth checking in with yourself about whether this self-sufficiency has become a barrier to intimacy. The King of Pentacles can sometimes be so comfortable in his own kingdom that he forgets to open the gates and let others in. Your past has made you strong and capable, but don't let it make you so independent that you can't accept support or love when it's genuinely offered. This card is ultimately positive because it shows that you've alchemized your experiences into wisdom and stability. You're ready to build something real and lasting, whether that's in relationships, creative projects, or your sense of self. Your past has been the foundation upon which this king energy has been built. So Virgo, when I look at all these cards together, what comes through is a really profound journey of emotional evolution. Your past hasn't been easy. There have been disappointments, upheavals, conflicts, and moments where you had to completely surrender control. But every single one of those experiences has shaped you into someone with incredible depth, wisdom, and strength. The patterns you carry now make sense when we see where they came from. That emotional withdrawal, that cautiousness, that need for stability, these aren't flaws. They're adaptations you develop to protect yourself and survive difficult times. The beautiful thing this reading reveals is that you're at a completion point. You've learned the lessons, integrated the experiences, and built a solid foundation within yourself. The question now becomes, what do you want to build on this foundation? How do you want to move forward knowing everything you know now? Your past doesn't have to define your future, but it has definitely equipped you with tools and awareness that will serve you well. I hope this reading gave you some clarity about why you feel the way you feel and why certain emotional patterns keep showing up. You're not broken, Virgo, you're experienced, and that's actually a beautiful thing. Trust that everything you've been through has prepared you for what's coming next, and know that you have the strength and wisdom to handle whatever that might be.